Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. This is a new presentation from www.central-mosque.com and the Humble Heart YouTube channel. The topic: shocking. Was Ayatollah Khomeini Indian or British? I have deviated from the thumbnail because while I was doing research for this, I've realized that there's another theory out there that he was actually of British origin. So we will address that as well as part of this presentation. First, a disclaimer. I am a Sunni. Number two, I do not agree with the doctrines or ideologies of the Shia because I believe they are not in conformance with normative Islam. But that is not my topic. I am here to discuss historical facts. So let's get on with the presentation. Ayatollah Khomeini, this is a portrait. His real name was Mustafavi Musawi, Ruhollah Mustafavi Musawi. So because he, in the Shia, part, in the Shia doctrine, they ascribed to 12 Imams. So they believe that his lineage belongs to number 4, I believe, the Imam number 4 out of the 12. So that's why his name is Mustafavi Musawi. He was born on 24th of September 1902 in a town which is today named after him, Khomeini, Iran. Now, the Shias claim that this is the same date as the birth of Fatima, may God be pleased with her, daughter of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. There are instantly two problems with that claim. Number one, there is no record in Islam of the exact date of birth of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him's daughter, Fatima. Number two, Khomeini's date of birth is disputed, so we don't know what his exact date of birth is. When I was going through records and as authentic records as I can, I found a number of dates, so we're not sure exactly what his date of birth was, but that's not the topic of my discussion either. The title of Imam was applied in 1964 by Ni'mat Mirzazada. He wrote a poem, in preference of Ruhollah Mustafavi Musawi. So in 1964 is the first time we find the title Imam applied to him, and then thereon it was reported, and it was actually added to different poems, etc. afterwards. So here's the gist of our conversation. Was he Indian, or specifically of Indian origin? This theory, if you find Indian right-wing media sites, forums, etc., they actually go out of their way to claim that, hey, one of the most influential Shia figures or leaders of our generation was actually ethnically Indian or of Indian origin, etc. What is the truth of that? There is actually some truth to it, because what happened is his family migrated to India in the 18th century from Nishapur. Nishapur is a very important historical town. Many historical figures come from that region, and they settled in India. In today, what we call the Uttar Pradesh, the UP province, there's a town, Kintur. They actually settled there. That is absolutely believable, and it is in the family records, because at the time India was, under the Muslim rule. It was a booming economy. A lot of people were moving in, etc. In this time of Kintur, there historically been many prominent Shia families. One of them was Abaqati family, or Khandane Abaqat, and the forefathers of Khomeini settled in Kintur. The first, I believe that you could call him his great grandfather, Zain al-Abidin al-Musawi, Hindi. Okay, so in Arabic and Persian, the people who whose ancestry or origins are from the Indian region, they are actually called Hindi. In Arabic, al-Hindi, or in Persian, Hindi. So he was born around 1800 and he lived until 1869. He's actually born in India. So he was born in India. He had links with the famous Shia families. Again, I don't want to go on a tangent. There is significant literature and records as to what this Shia family did. Many of them, like Mir Sadiq, Mir Jafar, people like that, the people who study Indian history well know what they did. They colluded with the British in overthrowing the Muslim rule, and actually embedded the British colonial rule in India. But let's move on from there. So this person, Zain al-Abidin al-Musawi, his name was actually Zain al-Abidin al-Musawi, and he was famously known as Hindi, born in India 1800 and lived until 1869. Around 1834, he travels to Iran and he settles in Najaf. So apparently, he went on a religious pilgrimage. There are religious Shia religious sites in Iran and Iraq. So he eventually settled in Najaf. He becomes a well-known acquaintance of a person called Yusuf Khan around Najaf. And he marries, and I've found two accounts for it. I'm not sure if this woman was Yusuf Khan's daughter or his sister. Could be either. More chances that he was Yusuf Khan's sister. And he eventually settles in Khomein, the town where Ayatollah Khomeini was born, and he takes the sister of Yusuf Khan, could have been the daughter, as the third wife, and he settles in Iran. He does not come back to India. In 1839, we continue. So he moved and settled in Iran. Let's say resettled in Iran, because as I said, they originally were from Nishapur area of Iran. They settle in Khomein around 1839, and he buys a huge property in 1839. Huge amounts of money. Nobody knows where this money came from. Some people say because Yusuf Khan, his brother-in-law or father-in-law, depending on how his third wife was related, he gave him the money. Who knows where that money came from, but they bought huge agricultural land, and they became, a mid-level landlords in India, and that's what Khomeini was. The idea, a lot of people say he came from poor background, is absolutely not true. In the society, because he had settled in Iran from India, as I said, he continued to be known as Hindi in the society. The father of Khomeini, Sayyid Mustafa, born in 1885. Once again, known as, there was a suffix to his name known as Hindi. Khomeini was born in 1902. Originally, the poetry of Khomeini when he was a young man is still available on the internet, and he used the pen name Hindi in his name as part of his poetry. Khomeini's father, Sayyid Mustafa, was murdered around 1903, and the reasons are still unknown as to why he was murdered. Khomeini's brother Nuruddin, he continued to be known as Nuruddin Hindi throughout his entire life, born in 1898, a few years before Khomeini, and died in 1986. So there is absolutely no doubt that his grandfather was born in India, and they were known as Hindi very commonly in the Iranian society. When he, as we know, the Islamic coup of 1979, even before that, when the Iranian government, when Khomeini apparently was, raising his concerns about the secularization and the tilt of the Iranian government towards the CIA and MI6, the Iranian government released plenty of documentation to discredit him as a foreign agent based on this Indian origin of his family and known as Hindi. So, he used that as a pen name in his poetry. This is available in Persian on the internet. His brother was known as Nurul Hindi, and that is a well-known fact. Then I came upon the second theory, and people claim that he was not. He was. In the second bit, there's also some Indian origin, and I'll get to that in a second, but primarily he was British. So this person right here, William Richard Williamson, 1870 to 1958 he lived. He was actually born in Bristol. He became Muslim, accepted Islam, and there's a pretty good book about this, The Arabian Adventure, the story of Haji Williamson. Haji in Islam is someone who goes to Mecca and performs a pilgrimage. So they say because he was originally part of the what we today know as BP, oil and gas, British Petroleum. It was originally known as Anglo-Persian Oil Company. So when oil was discovered in India, this person, Haji Williamson, he was part of the negotiations and trying to get the oil rights, etc. At some point along the line, he accepted Islam. He married multiple women, and there's evidence that he used to travel to Kashmir in India, because just to the mountains, to beat the heat of the plains or where the oil is being explored is in India. And there's a theory that he married a Kashmiri Indian wife, and from that Khomeini was born. One of the there's some evidence of that on the internet. I'll comment on that in 1 second, but much of it comes from this person, Colonel Archie Chisholm, and he was the former editor of the Times in UK, and he was also involved with Anglo-Persian Company. And they said he was asked some direct questions and kept quiet and didn't say anything. So that's what people claim that he was actually. Khomeini was still. His mom was from Kashmir, India at that time, Indian subcontinent under the British rule, but his father was actually British. If I was to comment on this, it just does not make any sense to me, and it is not a valid theory. The reason being is William Richard Williamson lived, until 1958. Khomeini first, was known in Iran, and these records still exist to this day, when in 1943, a new king comes to the throne. Muhammad Raza Pahlavi becomes the king of Iran in 1941. So he embarks on secular reforms and things like that. Khomeini refuted him in one of the first books on record that we know of that was written by him, Kashful Asrar. And this was famous in 1943. So if we say that Williamson died in 1958, Khomeini wrote a book as a scholar in 1943. So how many years is that? 15 years. And there's no record of anything like that whatsoever. So, secondly, as I talked about, when the Iranian government wanted to sanction him, wanted to exile him, they labeled him as a foreign agent because of his Indian heritage, Indian origin, whatever you want to call it. At that time, the government of Muhammad Raza Pahlavi was basically in the pocket of MI6 and CIA. They could have easily came up with this evidence and say, look, his father's British, blah blah blah, and they did not present any such thing. So it just, my mind tells me that's simply not true. This would have been quite easy for the government at that time because of the links with British and Americans, particularly MI6 and CIA. Easy to prove. They didn't do that. However, this part of it, of his Indian origin, absolutely, because his grandfather, his father, his brother, and he himself used this word Hindi, Indian, in his own original poetry. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.